is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft beer and craft chocolate. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional beer writer and an advanced cicerone, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or at her website, annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. French Broad Chocolates in Asheville, North Carolina provides cacao for a lot of craft breweries, which means we've talked about them and with them quite a few times on Bean to Barstool. Co-founder J.L. Skeffington has been interviewed in multiple episodes. I did a special episode about their Father's Day beer-infused bonbons a while back, and in the fall we talked with them in preparation for 2 nights of beer and chocolate events I led with them. A lot of the chocolate beers that came out of these collaborations tend to be pretty limited releases that don't make it far from a brewery's taproom and might only be available at certain times of year. One Asheville brewery works with French Broad Cacao for a line of chocolate Imperial Stouts that gets brewed year-round in large batches and actually sees meaningful distribution into other markets. Highwire Brewing 10W-40 is an Imperial Stout brewed with French Broad Cacao, local coffee, and Ugandan vanilla, and it's one of the brewery's most popular beers. They've used that sturdy base as a platform for dozens of different flavored variants, from blueberry crumble to Vietnamese coffee to the brand new chocolate taco version. With distribution throughout much of the eastern Midwest and southern East Coast, and almost a dozen taproom locations throughout those states, these beers are actually pretty available to a lot of drinkers. In this episode, we talk with Peter Batinski, head brewer at Highwire's South Slope location in Asheville, where he trials many of Highwire's beers and leads innovation, and Hank Marshall, head brewer at the Big Top, Highwire's production brewery near Biltmore Village in Asheville. Peter and Hank talk about developing new variants of 10W, the process of brewing the base beer, and the related beers that have sprung off from the 10W family. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool.
So the base beer is kind of like a big roasty, chocolatey stout, kind of thinking old school stout, but making some room for kind of all your adjuncts and whatnot. So you're kind of appealing to folks that will, enjoy a big stout, but also, some additions here and there of fruit or extra chocolate or some other wild flavors that we can add in.
That's Hank Marshall, Highwire's head production brewer, talking about the base version of 10W-40. I sat down with Hank and Peter Batinski to talk all about the 10W-40 family and started by asking about the additional ingredients that go into the base version to create a nuanced starting flavor profile to support a wide range of variants.
Yeah, so we've got the cacao nibs, so that's the main chocolate. We've got Ugandan vanilla and a dark roast from a local coffee roaster.
And is that always the same coffee roaster, or does that switch around?
About 99% of the time, it's going to be Dynamite, which is kind of the base recipe. If we're looking to switch it up, we've done that in the past on things like the Vietnamese coffee variant, where we did a cupping with another local roaster and kind of dialed it in for a different profile.
And that roaster was High Noon. You should definitely give her a shout out. Her coffee's killer. She's not that big of a company, does custom blends and all that stuff. And she was a bartender here for 7 or 8 years, and also in the coffee roasting business. Yeah. What she does is killer. She's just not that big of an operation. Dynamite, on the other hand, is fucking enormous.
Yeah, they're cute.
Yeah.
So you guys do so many different variants on top of this base beer. What is it about the base 10W-40 that you feel like is such a flexible platform? What makes it distinctive that allows it to work for so many different flavor profiles?
One of the reasons I feel like it hit first was Highwire was doing a lactose-fueled big stout, not lactose-fueled, but lactose-incorporated stout before a lot of people were doing it. I feel because I remember I was sitting in a local bar right next to my house, trying that and just being damn, not enough people are doing sweet stouts. It was us and Duck Rabbit, and it just they existed, but it wasn't as heavy as it is now, where you can get beers finishing where other beers start.
Right.
So the other thing is if you try 10W by itself, it's a just a damn good milk stout, man. Like that's it. And like it's chocolatey. It's not too chocolatey. It's roasty. It's not too roasty. So we have all these things to play off of, and those initial malt and beer flavors are really like kind of soft, and so that allows us to work off of it into other dynamics. Because one beer we were going to talk to you about right here is this. We have a chocolate taco, 10W. if that was too roasty, that beer wouldn't work.
Sure, that's fun. We'll get more on that beer in a little bit. That's the first I've seen that one. Seems like you guys are always kicking out new ones, and I'm like, oh, didn't think of that.
It's getting hard, man. We're almost like wondering what else is left.
So you guys work with French Broad Chocolates. They're in Asheville, well-known bean-to-bar chocolate company. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with them and how that works in the space for using their stuff for your beer.
French Broad is always willing to do custom this, custom that, whatever we want. And that's like the benefit of that relationship is, does this beer need a certain flavor from a certain kind of chocolate? They're there to make that happen. Like that's the beauty of that relationship. And their level of knowledge is unprecedented. Like anytime I've talked to other chocolatiers, I guess, when I mentioned French Broad in town, they're like, oh yeah, we know them. Like everyone knows them. Like they're definitely a great resource.
And do you always use the same nibs from them or the same products, or do you use a blend or whatever they have available? How does that work?
So the nibs that we get are made to order. So it's kind of whatever's coming down the line at the time. And there's, we're not getting a ton of nuance from the nibs. So we're not looking for any kind of specific other than kind of the chocolatey, that nutty profile that they're giving off. So typically, whatever they're processing in the moment for the nibs portion is good with us.
So there's not really like an origin selection process where you're picking a specific bean for a specific version or anything.
There's not an origin selection process now.
Sure. Let's talk about how you use the cacao and the other adjuncts in this beer. How do you infuse those flavors when you're brewing the beer?
So once the beer is finished, transferred into bright, we're actually recirculating the finished beer on the nibs and on the coffee. So it's in a hopback style vessel. It gets about a 4-hour recirc, and it's just, in a fine mesh bag and circulating through, and that's where it's picking up all its flavor. The coffee is ground, so picking up a little bit more flavor from the coffee than you would if it was whole bean.
And you're doing those both at the same time?
That's correct.
You don't find that one, does that quicker or slower than the other? You just put them both in for the same amount of time?
Yeah, they might, pick one up faster or slower, but the way we've got the target profile set right now is the way that we've done it forever. So we're finding that, you get a nice balance of the chocolate and the coffee with doing them together, and one's not going to be more astringent than the other or pulling a different flavor profile.
And you guys said you're doing whole bean now?
We're doing ground.
Ground, yeah. So I think the Vietnamese Coffee Quebec in whole bean. I can't remember.
I would think not, because we've always done ground. It could be something that Luke changed up for that one.
Yeah.
And does that timing get changed at all based on what the finished version of the beer is going to be, if you want more intensity or less intensity?
Traditionally, if we're looking for more or less intensity, we'll remove some of the volume, but the timing stays the same, kind of based around the volume of beer in the tank, whereas the volume of the chocolate or the coffee as well will be changed if we're looking for more or less intensity.
And you mentioned that you're using the fines in addition to the nibs. What do you feel like that adds beyond just using the nibs by themselves?
You got this one?
To my knowledge, we aren't using the fines.
You're not using the fines anymore?
No, we're just using the nibs.
Oh, okay, because for a while there, they were using the fines for sure. And this was an interesting project that me and Luke worked on. And maybe it should come back in a minute, because we were wondering what really came out of the fines. And so we did a really, really light blonde ale with fines in the mash just to see what we got out of it. So maybe we should chat about that, because it was yeah.
And then you mentioned vanilla. Is that going in at the same time, or when are you adding that?
So the vanilla is whole bean vanilla. They're hand split by the brewers, and that is steeped in the whirlpool throughout the entire whirlpool process. So it's hanging out in there until the knockout is finished. So that's all extracted hot side.
You mentioned Ugandan. Is there a particular character you feel like you're getting from that origin?
For me right now, it's a very standard vanilla.
Yeah.
It's a very, like, when you think of, and because we're brewing like pastry stouts, like it's a very standard vanilla, not like an extract, but not far from it. The most recent vanillas that I've used here have been Ugandan. It's not Madagascar, but it's not far off.
You have so many flavor concepts for this lineup, like we just discussed. You've got the chocolate taco that you just showed me. I've had everything from blueberry crumble to triple chocolate, all sorts of different stuff. How do you come up with those concepts, and what is the development process to get them dialed in?
Sitting around in a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind of picking people's brains about, what's your favorite dessert? What's your favorite past childhood sort of flavors? We're kind of diving in past desserts at this point. We've got a Mexican hot chocolate that we've done. We've done one that was recirced on Palo Santo wood. So we're kind of just, bouncing all sorts of ideas off the walls and just seeing what we can play with, because like Peter said earlier, this base is just phenomenal for just about any kind of adjunct or addition. So we really have an opportunity to do everything from fruit to heat to even more sweetness.
Yeah, I feel like when this program first started, like it hadn't been done a ton before, so there was a lot of ideas. And now we sit around a meeting and just kind of like chat with each other. And are we allowed to talk about the next one coming out?
Yeah,
we probably can. Yeah,
no,
like we have a Mudslide coming out.
Oh, nice.
Like, yeah, which should be really good.
Yeah,
like that was
there's a crew of folks that enjoy going over to the local Fridays when they're in town. The Mudslide is kind of their go-to drink there, so we're pulling this one off for them.
Yeah, and I mean it's good. It's damn good. Yeah.
So what's going into that one to achieve that?
This one, unfortunately, will be no cacao nibs. We'll be looking at extract flavors to really just impart that big, chocolate syrupy kind of Irish cream, and even a little bit of tinge of rum to kind of round everything out there.
Yeah, we had me and Luke had like a moment that was really important to me in recipe development, where like we were brewing a horchata, and we realized that when you go out and you drink a horchata, like the small Mexican restaurant didn't source local or vanilla beans and then extract them and make that. There's a time and a place for a cheap tasting syrup.
Sure.
That's what a Mudslide is. It's Fridays isn't out there with Peruvian
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say you come up with an idea. I mentioned the blueberry crumble. That was one that really surprised me that worked. You come up with that idea. What happens from there? Like, where are you going? If it's not a relatively straightforward concept where you're just really highlighting chocolate or coffee or something, how do you say this is what we have to do to get to this kind of esoteric flavor concept?
We've got a few, great suppliers. Cascade Beer Candy Syrups is one. Actually, they were part of the blueberry crumble, and they can dial in, all sorts of cool flavors, one-off ideas that we've got to add these syrups to the whirlpool, that sort of thing. So another one of my favorites is the coconut candy bar that we did. So there's a big coconut syrup edition, but they also send along all of the actual coconut in bags. So we end up hanging the whole coconut fiber in the whirlpool. So that's getting steeped hot side as well. So they're awesome to work with, and they're great to kind of dial in things that may not even be on their list of syrups that they make. Yeah.
They're soaking blueberries and candy syrup and doing all this stuff, and makes ease of application easier. And this dude's product is killer. So
we'll be right back.
Hey everyone, Final Gravity Issue 5 is now available in the shop on beantobarstool.com. This 5th issue of our zine telling personal, human-centered stories from the world of beer is full of great articles. Bano Segudu tells the story of the South African beer style Umkombothi, poignantly explaining its role in her culture and the importance in her family's celebrations and milestones. Maria Krugliak writes about discovering the Portuguese half-pint after moving to Portugal during the COVID-19 pandemic. Amanda Bruns and Obakeng Malope discuss the water spirit Mamuhaswa and the collaboration beer they brewed in her honor. These and numerous other stories fill the 56 pages of this zine. We've expanded it and added a few features for this issue. It's full color, full of lots of beautiful photography and art. Definitely check this out. It's on beantobarstool.com/shop. You can purchase this issue or subscribe, and you can always support us on Patreon and get extra perks as well. Cheers. On your side, is there much trial and error to get a finished beer right, or do you not really have much opportunity to test those out?
On now, like we've done this so many times that like we wanted to do blueberry again, we want to do coconut again. I feel like we've done it, and like we know like ratios and where to start.
we've got
Yeah.
good consistency from these
Yeah.
suppliers. And so we know that, if blueberry hit at this number and then the numbers are lining up for coconut, then we can count on that being like a similar intensity flavor profile wise. And also with Peter's small batch facility, we have the ability to really test things out on a small scale. If it's something that we're truly worried about or something that's new to us, we can run a 5-barrel batch, or we can run a couple gallons or even 15 barrels if we're really wanting to crank something out.
Peter, is that coming up very often that you're testing these out?
Like I was saying, like we have gotten to the point where we've like done so much of this that we really have it dialed in at the big top. It was like twice a month we would be trialing new things for 10W up here. Now it's like a couple times a year. Yeah, like they've really got it dialed in at the big top, which is like, it's great because speed of production, man, like it doesn't have to get trialed here, wait for a result, pass that off. And it's also good for the customers because, if we brew a trial batch up here, we've got to serve it under a different name. Then somebody might have already seen it. And now if just the big top does it, like unseen, unheard of, good to go.
What production size are you brewing 10W-40 on?
Typically, for these different variants, we're doing between 90 and 180 barrels, just depending on what the request for that time around was. So the one coming up, for example, the Mudslide, I think we're somewhere around 150 barrels. So that'll be 5 batches.
And are there any variants that are year round or that are consistently around?
The consistent, right? The base. So we run the base once or twice a year, I believe, and that stays consistent and true to what it was.
I don't know. We all agree. Base, I think base is the best.
The base is killer.
Yeah, it's just killer. Like, make sure people know that. Like, it's so damn good. And the
sounds like a very like brewer's opinion. Like the base beer is the best.
Well, everyone doesn't drink a full 8% stout after work. We're pretty good about taking a little sidecar. So you get your lager, and then you get a little 4 to 6 ounce pour of 10W, and that's what a lot of folks are doing. And you get the opportunity to try all these different variants that we've made, but you don't feel locked into drinking a 16 ounce pour of an 8% stout after work.
Mexican hot chocolate was the most painful.
The peppers.
Carolina Reaper powder. It was like having tear gas in the fucking air.
Oh my God.
I don't know. Like,
yeah, I think some people would say some were harder than others just because there was more labor involved with syrups or a different recirc and that sort of thing. So, some have gotten multiple recircs because we, added wood chips or something like that. So, different departments or end up doing different things for some of these beers. So the Mudslide one coming up, that will be easier on the brew deck and a little bit more work for the cellar, but less work than normal for the cellar because they're not recircing. So, everyone kind of has an opinion on what's been more work or not.
And Creme Brulee was really difficult because we had to balance out. We added an actual ingredient from Creme Brulee. I can't remember, like it was some type of like confectionery, like almost like butter, and fat and beer don't mix. So to get the flavor right, we had to like hit this like very specific, very tiny amount.
Hank, you mentioned having a small sidecar of this after the shift. This was part of the origin of 5W-30, right? Was the idea of having a smaller version that you could drink more of? Talk a little bit about that beer.
So 5W is kind of just a lower grab version of 10W. It's got a lot of the same malt bill. It's got vanilla, cacao nibs, and coffee, same roast. So we're just kind of, talking about a 5%, 5.5% beer instead of an 8% beer. So that was something that you could just sit down and actually drink and enjoy and feel refreshed rather than kind of like you're having a meal afterward.
What's the response been to that? Do people kind of want the indulgence of the 10W-40, or has there been a pretty good response to the lower?
Yeah. The people want the indulgence.
Yeah,
there's a time and a place for a low grab stout, and I think that's kind of one of those brewers beers, like our light lagers that we enjoy. So, the market has really trended towards these big, just aggressive flavored stouts.
Well, on that note, let's talk about 20W-50 at the other end of the spectrum. I got to taste that when I was there in November. Talk a little bit about the development of that beer and where it kind of sits in the portfolio for these.
So this will be a good story to tell. So 20W-50 started as I brewed a stout like right before COVID hit. It was this idea I had for a stout, and it took me like 3 days to make it because it was like back when I had a barrel and a half system. I had to do all these different boils and 3 days of boiling beer for like 6 hours a day. And I asked the label designer, the owner's gonna be pissed off about this one. I asked the label designer, I was like, just call it Sir Charles, which is named after my dog. Like, just make the label. I'll put it in the bottles, and then we have to label it. And the beer ended up like killer. Ended up great. And so we decided to transform that into 20W-40 and do our like bigger, no expense spared 20W-40 line. And which I'm revisiting some 10W actually the most current recipe about to come out is a 20W-40 Semla, which is a type of Swedish pastry. It's a cardamom, vanilla, almond. And it's a flavor combo that I love. We'll see what people think. But I tried to push that for a 10W-40 way back in the day. And it didn't take off. So we're going to try it on a higher ABV scale, and it's killer. It's great. We just canned it last week. I don't know when it's coming out, like within the next month or two. So right now, 20W-40 is kind of revisiting some other batches of 20W-40 and some batches of 10W-40 that didn't not take off, but that we think would be better at a higher graph scale.
And what is the strength on 20W?
13.2.
Okay, cool. What's our final gravity on that?
Oh man, last one finished at like 11, I think. Yeah, I can go grab it, but it's like a 4-hour boil. It's 4 to 6 hour boil. We boil 2 gravity for that one. Yeah, and then we have another. Hopefully, soon we're gonna have the 20W Cafe de Olla come back, which is a type of Mexican coffee. Star anise, Mexican cinnamon, and Mexican chipas coffee. Pinch of cacao in that one. Not a whole lot, but just a pinch. And so hopefully that one will be coming back, because when we produced that, it was killer, but we only made 12 cases because we had such a small system up here back then.
Sure. So when you're brewing on the smaller system here downtown, are you using the same recirc method, or are you just steeping?
I'm going to use the same recirc method here because I just got the actual piece of equipment to do it. Yeah. And it's dependent on what we're doing, though. I mean, cacao, I like to do because they're on a production scale, things have to keep moving. If I have time, I like to do a cacao soak and then recirc in the morning, if possible. If I have time and the equipment allows me to be able to do that, yeah.
What have been the best sellers from the 10W-40 family?
King cake, got to be king cake. Is it?
I don't know if it's king cake or not.
King cake was like sold out day of, I think. One mesh was.
King cake was big. Best sellers is kind of hard for me to say. They come and they go, and some have sat on the shelf for a little bit, and others have just flown. I think one that was a hit, at least in my eyes, was the Palo Santo aged one. We did a recirc on Palo Santo wood. And this was kind of a summer variety that we did, and it kind of thinned it out just a hair and added this kind of wild tropical coconut flavor profile to it. So it drank more. It drank like a lower ABV stout than it was, just because that body wasn't as big, but then had all the summer kind of tropical aromas from that wood. So that was really cool.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'd love to try that one. Do you have individual favorites from the lineup?
Bourbon Barrel, man.
Bourbon Barrel is great.
Yeah.
The Mexican hot chocolate was really good. The coconut candy bar, I'm a big Mounds fan, so that was kind of our play there.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was killer. I like the blueberry crumble a lot as well.
Yeah, that one really surprised me quite a bit. What are some other beers you've brewed that have used cacao?
We did a raspberry chocolate.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Ale a couple years ago. So that was really cool. It was lactose vanilla, fruited with raspberry. It's kind of like a light-ish base. So the chocolate really had an opportunity to shine in that one, rather than kind of melding with the grist the way it does in 10W. So that allowed the cacao to pop along with the raspberry and kind of create like a Valentine's Day chocolate covered raspberry sort of vibe.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, tell us briefly about the chocolate taco, since you showed me the can there.
Well, we're going to go ahead and have part of it in front of you. So I tried this with my girlfriend last night, and y'all nailed this.
Yeah.
Nailed it. I mean, because I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it comes through as chocolate syrup and ice cream, and it just tastes like a chocolate taco from a gas station. It's spot on. Yeah.
How did you get the waffle cone or whatever that part of the taco? How did you get that flavor in there?
You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so we used the waffle powder in the fermenter. So we put it in the same way that we do a dry hop, similar hop back system and it was dumped in during primary fermentation, either day of knockout or the day after. So that way it's just cleaning everything up. And then we had some more natural flavoring heading in there and just kind of rounded everything out, really made the powder pop, and added that touch to the nose of like a crispy waffle.
Yeah. It's there enough that it's there with the waffle, but it's not overpowering. Not that a waffle could ever be overpowering. I mean, granted that by the time you're done eating a waffle, you don't want another waffle usually.
Well, that sounds really good. All right, last question I'll ask you. Do either of you have a 10W-40 concept that you would love to try at some point that you haven't had the chance to?
Yeah, we have, I'm about to release a sour beer with Amburana wood. I'm sure by now you're familiar with this. It's starting to take off. So, I mean, we're going to do a 20W Amburana, and I'm sure that we could do a 10W Amburana. It would just take off like a Palo Santo would. Yeah. Not to speak for Hank in terms of 10W. That's his project and 20's mine. But Amburana, and I'm really excited to bring back Jelly Donut to the 20W series, which is boysenberries and sweet cherries. So not something new, but really excited to bring that back. Yeah.
Cool. Hank, how about you?
Yeah, I've been wanting to do, like some big tropical fruit, chocolate covered tropical fruit sort of go at it. So papaya and mango and pineapple, that sort of thing. Dripping wet piece of fruit covered in chocolate. Summertime, we're releasing these beers all year long, and it's kind of easy to come up with stuff for the winter just because that's what the base is. Kind of spinning it off for summer has been something fun to try.
A tropical fruit version of 10W-40 sounds amazing, so I hope I get to try that one. You can tell from our conversation there are so many variants of 10W, and I've been so impressed with how good even the more unusual versions have been. If you live in North or South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, or Indiana, you should be able to track down these beers when they're released. Let me know what you end up trying. Check out highwirebrewing.com for a map of their taproom locations across their distribution area and visit the one nearest you. Thanks to Hank and Peter for coming on the show today, and to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.